The suburb of Springboro, Ohio, lay nestled in the gentle hills south of Dayton, a patchwork of tidy lawns and brick houses that glowed faintly under the sodium streetlights. It was the kind of place where people moved to escape the clamor of urban life, where the loudest sound at night was the chirping of crickets or the occasional bark of a neighbor's dog. On this particular night, March 20th, 2025, a cool breeze swept through the streets, carrying the scent of damp grass and budding trees, a whisper of spring in a world still clinging to winter's edge. At 1427 Maple Lane stood the modest home of Ryan and Emily Carter, a young couple in their late 20s who had staked their claim on this quiet corner of the world 6 months earlier. The house was a fixer-upper, with peeling paint on the shutters and a roof that leaked during heavy rain, but to them it was a canvas for their dreams. Ryan, a lanky man with warm brown eyes and a mop of perpetually messy hair, worked as a mechanic at a local garage, his hands perpetually stained with grease. Emily, with her auburn curls and quick smile, taught third grade at Springboro Elementary, her days filled with the chatter of children and the smell of crayons. Inside, the house was a testament to their life together. The living room held a sagging couch they'd scored at a garage sale, a coffee table littered with half-read books, and a scratched-up cat tree where their gray tabby Mittens reigned supreme. The kitchen bore the marks of Emily's baking experiments, flour-dusted counters and a perpetually sticky jar of honey. And in the bedroom, a simple oak bed frame cradled their shared existence, the quilt a patchwork of memories stitched together over years of love. Tonight they'd fallen asleep after a lazy evening of popcorn and an old rom-com on TV, the kind where misunderstandings always resolved with a kiss. Ryan lay sprawled across his side of the bed, one leg dangling off the edge, his soft snores blending with the hum of the refrigerator down the hall. Emily curled beside him, her breathing slow and rhythmic, her face peaceful in the dim glow of a nightlight shaped like a crescent moon. The window in the living room, left cracked open to let in the breeze, swayed the curtains ever so slightly, a gentle dance in the stillness. At 2:17 a.m., that stillness fractured. A faint thud echoed from the living room, soft, almost imperceptible, like a book toppling from a shelf or Mittens knocking over a candle. Ryan stirred, his brow creasing as the sound tugged him from the depths of sleep. He opened one eye, peering into the darkness, his mind sluggish as it sifted through possibilities. "Mittens," he mumbled, picturing the cat's smug face as she batted something off the table again. He rubbed his face, the stubble rough against his palm, and rolled over, tugging the blanket higher. The night swallowed him again, oblivious to the danger creeping closer. Beyond the bedroom door, the living room window creaked as it was forced wider, the wooden frame groaning under the pressure of a crowbar. Two figures emerged from the shadows outside, their movements fluid and rehearsed, as if they'd done this a dozen times before. The taller one, broad-shouldered and clad in a black hoodie, adjusted the ski mask over his face, his breath steady and controlled. His companion, shorter and wirier, clutched a wooden baseball bat, his gloved hands flexing nervously around the grip. A coil of rope hung from his belt, alongside a sheathed hunting knife that glinted faintly in the moonlight. They stepped inside, their boots leaving muddy smears on the hardwood floor Emily had spent a weekend polishing. The taller man scanned the room, his eyes darting from the couch to the hallway, while the shorter one tightened his grip on the bat, his breathing quick and shallow. "Let's make this quick," the taller one whispered, his voice a low rasp muffled by the mask. The shorter one nodded, his lips curling into a faint, eager grin. They moved toward the hallway, their shadows stretching long and distorted across the walls, silent predators in a house that had no idea it was prey. Ryan's return to sleep was fleeting. A blinding beam of light sliced through the darkness, raking across his face like a spotlight. He jolted awake, his heart slamming against his ribs, confusion warring with a sudden, primal fear. "What the hell?" he began, sitting up, but the words died as a crushing force slammed into the side of his head. Pain erupted, white-hot and disorienting, as he tumbled off the bed and hit the floor with a sickening thud. The room spun, his vision blurring, and he tasted the metallic tang of blood where his lip had split open. Emily's scream pierced the air, sharp and terrified, as she scrambled upright in bed. The flashlight swung toward her, catching her wide green eyes and the pale curve of her cheek before a gloved hand clamped over her mouth, stifling her cries. She clawed at the arm, her nails scraping uselessly against the thick fabric of the sleeve, her legs kicking beneath the tangled sheets. Her gaze darted to Ryan, sprawled on the floor, and a sob caught in her throat as she saw the blood streaking his face. The taller intruder loomed over Ryan, a towering shadow against the faint glow of the streetlights filtering through the curtains. With a grunt, he seized Ryan by the collar of his faded t-shirt and yanked him upright. Ryan swayed, his head throbbing, a warm trickle of blood sliding from his forehead into his left eye. "Move it," the man growled, his voice rough and commanding, shoving Ryan toward a wooden chair in the corner, the one Emily had painted white and dubbed their throne after finding it at a flea market. Now it was a tool of captivity. The shorter intruder tossed a coil of rope to his partner, who caught it with practiced ease and began binding Ryan's wrist behind the chair. The coarse fibers scraped his skin raw, the knots pulled tight with ruthless precision. Ryan's shoulders strained as he tested the restraints, but the ropes held fast, biting deeper with every twist. "Let us go, you sons of bitches," he shouted, his voice cracking with fury and fear. The taller man ignored him, securing the final knot, then stepped back and drove a fist into Ryan's jaw. The blow snapped his head to the side, stars exploding in his vision, and he slumped forward with a groan. Emily thrashed against her captor, her muffled screams growing frantic as the shorter man dragged her back toward the bed. His grip was iron, his fingers leaving red marks on her arms as he pinned her down. "Shut her up," the taller one ordered, his tone clipped and detached, as he adjusted his stance near Ryan, keeping him in check. The flashlight beam danced wildly across the walls, casting jagged, nightmarish shadows that seemed to taunt the couple's plight. Ryan's head pounded, each heartbeat a hammer against his skull, but the sight of Emily struggling sharpened his focus. He met her eyes, those eyes he'd fallen in love with over coffee 5 years ago, and a surge of desperation clawed at his chest. "Don't touch her!" he roared, throwing his weight against the chair. It rocked slightly, the legs scraping the floor, but the ropes refused to yield. The taller man turned, his masked face a blank void, and delivered a vicious punch to Ryan's stomach. The air whooshed out of him, and he doubled over as far as the restraints allowed, gasping, his defiance crumbling into pain. The bedroom, once their haven of whispered dreams and quiet mornings, had transformed into a war zone. The air was thick with terror, the walls closing in as the intruders asserted their dominance. Ryan's mind raced, searching for a way out, but every thought drowned in the rising tide of helplessness. Emily's sobs echoed in his ears, a sound that would haunt him long after the night was over. Emily hit the mattress hard as the shorter intruder threw her down, the springs creaking beneath her weight. He straddled her, his knees pinning her thighs, while the taller one stood guard near Ryan, his presence a silent threat. Her nightgown, soft cotton, a pale blue she'd worn threadbare, was torn apart with a single savage yank, the ripping sound reverberating like a thunderclap. She screamed again, a raw, animalistic cry, but it was swallowed by the weight of her attacker pressing down on her. The shorter man laughed, a grating, nasal sound that slithered through the room like poison. "Look at her, squirming like a little bird," he sneered, his breath hot against her ear as he leaned closer. Emily turned her face away, tears streaming down her cheeks, her body shaking uncontrollably. The taller man remained silent, his posture stiff and unyielding, but he didn't intervene. His role was clear: control the scene, let his partner indulge. Ryan's world narrowed to the sight before him, his wife's humiliation unfolding in agonizing clarity. The intruders took turns, their movements a grotesque blend of precision and savagery, as if they were performing a ritual they'd perfected. Emily's cries weakened, her voice breaking into shattered whimpers as her strength ebbed away. The shorter man's laughter wove through her sobs, a twisted harmony that burrowed into Ryan's psyche, branding itself there forever. He fought the ropes with feral intensity, his wrists chafing until they bled, his muscles burning with the effort. "Stop it! I'll kill you both!" he bellowed, his voice raw and ragged, spit and blood flecking his lips. He pictured himself breaking free, lunging at them, tearing them apart with his bare hands. But the fantasy crumbled against the reality of his bonds. Blood dripped onto the floor, pooling beneath the chair, a dark testament to his futility. The taller intruder stepped closer, drawing a hunting knife from his belt. The blade caught the faint light, gleaming coldly as he pressed it against Ryan's throat. A thin line of blood welled up, warm and stinging, and Ryan froze, his breath hitching. "Keep screaming, and she's dead," the man hissed, his voice a low growl that carried the weight of a promise. Ryan's eyes flicked to Emily, her face a mask of despair, and he swallowed his rage, the knife's edge a brutal reminder of his powerlessness. It lingered a moment longer, then withdrew, leaving him trembling with suppressed fury. The assault stretched on, time warping into a haze of pain and degradation. Emily's resistance faded, her body going limp as she retreated inward, her mind seeking refuge where her body could not. The shorter man wiped sweat from his brow, still chuckling, while the taller one adjusted his mask, his movements methodical, almost mechanical. When they finally stepped back, sated and breathless, Emily lay curled on the bed, her torn nightgown clinging to her skin, her eyes vacant and unseeing. Ryan's chest heaved, his breasts shallow and ragged, as he stared at the wreckage of his wife. The guilt was a living thing, clawing at his insides, whispering that he'd failed her, that he'd failed them both. The intruders had taken more than their bodies. They'd stolen the life they'd built, leaving only ashes in its place. The intruders slipped out through the living room window, their departure as silent as their arrival, swallowed by the night's embrace. The house settled back into a hollow quiet. The only sounds the faint drip of blood from Ryan's wounds and the shallow, uneven breaths of two broken souls. He sat slumped in the chair, his head bowed, the rope still cutting into his flesh like a cruel reminder of his captivity. It took nearly an hour for him to free himself. His fingers, numb and slick with blood, fumbled with the knots, each tug a battle against exhaustion and despair. When the ropes finally gave way, the chair tipped over with a crash, and he staggered to his feet, his legs trembling beneath him. He crawled to the bed, ignoring the pain that flared with every movement, and gathered Emily into his arms. She flinched, a soft whimper escaping her lips, but she didn't pull away. Her skin was clammy, her body shivering, and her eyes stared past him, lost in a void he couldn't reach. "Em," he whispered, his voice cracking like brittle glass. "I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm here." He rocked her gently, his tears falling onto her hair, mingling with the sweat and grime. She didn't respond, didn't acknowledge him, her silence a wall he couldn't breach. The woman who'd laughed with him over burnt pancakes, who danced with him in the kitchen to no music at all, was gone, buried beneath the weight of what had been done to her. They stayed like that as the first light of dawn bled through the curtains, a gray pallor that seemed to mock their suffering. Ryan reached for his phone on the nightstand, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. He dialed 911, his voice barely audible as he spoke. "We need help. Someone broke in. They hurt us. Please hurry." The operator's calm questions felt distant, unreal, and he stumbled through answers, each word a shard of glass in his throat. The police arrived at 6:43 a.m., their sirens slicing through the morning stillness. Officers flooded the house, their boots tracking mud over the floor Emily had once scrubbed with pride. They photographed the scene, the splintered window frame, the muddy footprints, the blood-streaked chair. A detective named Hargrove, a grizzled man with tired eyes and a notepad, sat with Ryan and Emily in the kitchen, asking gentle but insistent questions. Ryan recounted what he could, his voice hollow, while Emily stared at the table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, offering only nods or single-word replies. The intruders had left little behind. No fingerprints, no clear trail. The police promised to investigate, to follow leads. But as days turned to weeks, the case grew cold. Neighbors whispered about the attack, their once friendly greetings replaced with averted eyes and hushed tones. The suburb of Springboro, their refuge from the world, became a prison of memories neither could escape. In the aftermath, Ryan and Emily drifted through their days like ghosts. He tried to care for her, bringing her tea she wouldn't drink, coaxing her to eat meals she barely touched. But she withdrew further, her laughter replaced by silence, her warmth by a chilling distance. He saw his own failure in her every glance, a relentless echo of, "I should have fought harder, done more." The physical scars faded, the gash on his forehead, the abrasions on his wrists, but the wounds within festered, raw and unhealing. The little house on Maple Lane stood as a monument to their shattered dreams, its walls echoing with the ghosts of laughter and love. They didn't speak of moving, didn't speak of much at all. The night had ended, but the darkness remained, an indelible stain on their lives, a shadow they carried into every tomorrow.